It usually comes after something small, something your child says almost in passing. Maybe your daughter's getting dressed one morning and suddenly asks, "Mom, do I look fat?" Maybe your son pinches the skin on his stomach and laughs. Maybe your child pushes away dinner after eating only a few bites, or asks why you're eating something different than everyone else. Maybe they come home from school and casually mention that another kid said sugar is bad. And before they even finish the sentence, something happens inside you. Your chest tightens, your mind starts moving faster. You begin scanning the moment for clues. Where did they hear that? Have I said something? Did they notice something I've been doing? Is this normal? Should I respond? Should I not make a big deal about it? And somewhere underneath all those questions is another one, a much more frightening one. Is this how it starts? And then comes the thought you almost don't want to say out loud. Please don't let this become their story. If you've ever carried an eating disorder or spent years trying to untangle yourself from food and body shame, you may know this fear quite well. Because sometimes one of the hardest parts of recovery in motherhood isn't only worrying about ourselves anymore. It's looking at the person we love more than anything in the world and wondering whether something we've spent our lives fighting might somehow find its way to them. Welcome to Live the Shame. I'm Crystal Cargis, mom of 5, registered dietitian, lactation consultant, and a mother in eating disorder recovery. This is a soft place to land for mothers who are healing while raising their children. Here, we tell the truth about food, body image, motherhood, and the quiet place shame still lives. Because you don't have to be fully healed to be a good mother, and you were never meant to carry this alone. I'm so glad you're here. Today, I want to sit with one of the questions I hear from mothers more than almost any other. How do I keep my child from going through what I went through? But I think underneath that question is another one we don't talk about nearly enough. What if trying so hard to prevent every wound has become another place where shame is asking us to be perfect? One of the most heartbreaking things mothers say to me is, "I'm watching everything I say. I'm trying not to talk about my body. I'm trying not to diet in front of them. I'm trying not to comment on what they're eating. I'm trying to let them trust their hunger. I'm trying so hard not to pass this on." And when I hear these words, I don't hear carelessness. I hear vigilance, sometimes exhausting vigilance. Because when you know firsthand what an eating disorder can take from a life, you don't want your child anywhere near that pain. So you start watching. Not only them, you start watching yourself. Maybe your child asks for another cookie and you notice the thought that flashes through your mind before you've even had time to examine it. Maybe your daughter walks into the kitchen wearing something that shows her changing body, and suddenly you're remembering being her age. Maybe your child says they're full halfway through dinner, and you're trying to decide whether to trust them or worry. Maybe someone comments on your child's body at a family gathering, and every protective instinct in you comes alive. Or maybe it's even smaller than that. You catch yourself saying something about your own body, something you wish you hadn't said. And the second the words leave your mouth, your stomach drops. Did they hear me? Did I just plant something? Should I correct it? Did I already do damage? Sometimes motherhood and recovery can feel like living with an internal surveillance camera running all day long, watching what you eat, watching what you say, watching what your children eat, watching how they talk about their bodies, watching how other people talk about their bodies, watching for any sign that something might be going wrong. And underneath all of that watching is often one enormous hope Please let it be different for them. I think that's important to name because when we talk about breaking generational cycles, it can sound empowering, and it is, but it can also feel terrifying because once you've decided this stops with me, it's very easy for that sentence to quietly become, then I can never get this wrong. And those are not the same thing. For a long time, I think part of me believed the safest thing I could do was to make sure my children never saw me struggle. If I could heal enough, hide enough, control my reactions enough, say all the right things, then maybe they could grow up untouched by any of it. Maybe I could build some invisible wall between my history and theirs. But motherhood has humbled me again and again because children don't grow up with perfectly healed people. They grow up with human beings who get tired, who become afraid, who sometimes hear an old voice come out of their own mouth, who sometimes recognize the wound only after they've reacted from it. And maybe the goal was never to make sure my children never witness my humanity. Maybe the question is, what do they learn about being human when they do? Do they learn that mistakes have to be hidden, that hard feelings make someone unsafe, that getting something wrong means the relationship is broken? Or do they learn that people can notice, that we can tell the truth, that we can apologize, that we can come back, that we can do something differently next time? That's when something shifted for me. Breaking cycles wasn't going to mean never repeating anything. It was going to mean becoming willing to notice what I was repeating and choose what happened next. I think one of the greatest gifts recovery has given me isn't that I always know the right thing to say. I don't. It's that I'm learning how to come back after I've snapped, to come back after fear spoke first, to come back when I realized that something I said carried more of my own history than I wanted it to. Sometimes repair sounds very ordinary. I'm sorry. I wished I had answered that differently. Or, that was my worry talking. You didn't do anything wrong. Or, can we try that conversation again? Or, even, I was having a hard moment with my own body. That wasn't about yours. There's something profoundly healing about letting children experience this. Not because repair erases everything, it doesn't. And not because we shouldn't turn repair into another motherhood checklist. Did I apologize correctly? Did I repair quickly enough? Did I say the perfect words? That's just perfectionism wearing a different outfit. Repair isn't a performance, it's relationship. It's the willingness to say, something happened between us and you matter enough to me that I'm willing to come back to it. And repair teaches something perfection never can. It teaches children that relationships can bend without breaking, that mistakes don't have to become secrets, that love can survive honesty, that adults can take responsibility without collapsing into shame, that we don't have to be flawless to remain connected. And maybe most importantly, it teaches them that their mother's struggle was never their responsibility to fix. That's something I want to stay with for a moment. Because children don't need to become our reason to recover perfectly. They don't need the burden of being the thing that finally makes us get better. They're allowed to simply be our children, and we're allowed to need support that exists outside of them. Our treatment, our therapists, our dietitians, our partners, our friends, our community. Our recovery belongs to us. And that might actually free our children from carrying something that was never theirs. There's something else I want to gently name here. Eating disorders don't come from one thing. There isn't one comment, one lunch, one parenting mistake, or one imperfect mother that explains why someone develops an eating disorder. These illnesses are complex. Biology matters, genetic matters, temperament matters, environment matters. Culture and life experiences and relationships matter. And yes, parents matter deeply, but parents are not the whole story. I think that's especially important for mothers in recovery to hear because we can carry an enormous sense of responsibility. We know how painful this illness has been. So naturally, we want to identify every possible risk and remove it because sometimes that desire becomes hypervigilance. Every bite feels meaningful. Every body comment feels dangerous. Every change in appetite feels like evidence. Every difficult day feels like a warning. And that is simply too much for one nervous system to hold. You have influence, yes. You don't have total control. Those are very different things. Your influence matters. The conversations you're having matters. The environment you're creating matters. Your willingness to seek support matters. Your repair matters. But none of those require perfection. Children don't need flawless modeling. They need relationships where curiosity can exist, where emotions are allowed, where food isn't a measure of morality, where bodies aren't a measure of worth, where adults can say, I got that wrong, where help is something we reach for rather than something we're ashamed to need, where love doesn't disappear when things get messy. And maybe breaking a cycle looks less like creating a childhood completely untouched by struggle and more like creating a childhood where struggle doesn't have to become shame. So if you've been carrying the fear that you've already messed this up, I wonder if today we could loosen that story just a little. Maybe there's a moment you replay, something you said at dinner, a comment you made about your body, a time you became anxious about what your child was eating, a season when your own eating disorder was louder than you wanted it to be. And every time you remember it, shame whispers, see, you already passed it on. But what if instead of asking, did I ruin something? You ask, is there anything here I want to return to? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Maybe your child barely remembers the moment you've replayed 100 times. But if something does need tending, repair doesn't always have to be elaborate. It might simply sound like, I've been thinking about something I said the other day. I wish I'd handled that differently. That came from some of my own worries, and I don't want you to carry them. And then you keep living. You keep practicing. You keep allowing the relationship to be bigger than the moment. Because one conversation does not define your child's future. One hard day doesn't erase years of connection. One reaction doesn't determine the relationship your child will have with food or their body. And one moment of struggle doesn't undo your healing. Sometimes breaking a cycle happens in enormous ways. And sometimes it happens in the quiet moment when we decide to come back. I want to return to that moment we started with. Your child saying something small. Do I look fat? I'm not hungry. Can I have another one? And suddenly your whole history seems to arrive in the room. Maybe your heart still races sometimes. Maybe the old fears still show up. Maybe you don't always know the perfect thing to say. I don't think that's the measure of whether you're breaking the cycle. Maybe the measure is that now you notice, you get curious, you seek support, you come back when you need to, you keep making room for a different story. Friend, if you're trying so hard not to pass this on, I already know something about you. You care deeply about what your children inherit from you. But I hope you remember that they aren't only inheriting your wounds. They're also witnessing what you do with them. They're seeing you question things that may never have been questioned before. They're seeing you reach for help. They're seeing you learn a different language about food and bodies. They're seeing you repair. They're seeing you choose connection over perfection again and again. Maybe breaking a generational cycle doesn't mean nothing painful ever gets passed down. Maybe it means something different gets passed down alongside it. Language, awareness, compassion, repair, permission to ask for help. The knowledge that struggle does not cancel belonging. And maybe someday when your children encounter their own tender places, as all human beings eventually do, they won't believe those places make them broken. Maybe they'll know what you've been learning too. We can struggle and still be loved. We can make mistakes and come back. We can need help and still belong. And healing doesn't have to happen perfectly to change what comes next. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If this conversation brought up something tender, I hope you'll carry it gently. And if you're looking for a place where you don't have to navigate these fears alone, Lift the Shame is my free monthly support space for mothers navigating eating disorder recovery through motherhood. There is room for the unfinished parts of you there too. Until next time, take gentle care of yourself and remember, your children don't need a mother who never carries a wound. They need to know that wounds can be tended. I'll meet you here next week. Bye for now.